we're back on the restream. You will notice that today I do not have Sam with me. So I don't know if the show is going to be 35 minutes or 2 hours and 35 minutes, but you are in for a fun ride because we have some fun guests. But before we get to that, I have some announcements. So please bear with me as I show you, as I share my screen with you. This always takes me a minute without Sam. We have our virtual play series coming up, and here are the shows. So right now, online, you have Happy and Gay. That is ending on May 23rd. That's coming up. So you want to make sure and catch that before it goes off. And then following that, ending our season 1 of our virtual series, we have The Test by Ron Watson. And if you will remember, that is starring our very own Sam Gianfala. So that starts on May 23rd and ends June 20th. And then also on the 28th, we have A Night with Gilbert and Sullivan, The Kings of Patter. And that was directed by Catherine, and you're never going to guess who's hosting it. That's right, it's me. I'm really excited about this. This is so fun, and this features multiple talented people from our Kentwood Players membership. And y'all, we need a new roof, and we need some other things about the building. You know this. You've been there. She needs some love and care. So come join us. We're going to entertain you with Gilbert and Sullivan, and then if you feel inclined and you have the means, you can go to our GoFundMe and give us a little donation of love. And that is on May 28th. And don't forget also that, let me stop sharing and come back to you all. Don't forget also that on the 27th, Gruesome Playground Injuries with Little Renegade Productions, and that is following that is a Q&A. So make sure and go to Little Renegade Productions website, and you have to register for both the show, which you don't want to miss, streaming that whole weekend, but the Q&A, that's a separate registration. So you want to make sure and do that. Let me see what other, oh yes, don't forget to watch Daniel's Happy and Gay wedding cake martini drink video to learn how to make the wedding cake martini. We have it also as a cocktail and a mocktail. And I have to say the mocktail is very good, very sugary, which is perfect. And also, this is your last day tomorrow is your last day for the elections. So if you did not get your ballot in, drive it up, drop it in the mail slot at the theater building, and that way you can be counted for our May board elections. Amazing people running, as you all know. So this is really good. This is a really great time to make sure that your voice is heard. All right. And I did all of that. Wonderful. Okay, those are our announcements. And as always, I want to do an acknowledgement of the ancestral lands that we are all on here in Southern California. Today's guests are all here in Southern California, and acknowledging the ancestral lands of the Tongva people. And here's your little fact that I learned this week about where the historical lands are located. And this is the Gabrielino Tongva Tribal History in Los Angeles County and Orange County. I didn't know it was so large a space. So that's really very interesting. And they are indigenous to the Los Angeles Basin for 7,000 years. I can't. The history is well documented through 2,800 archaeological sites, state historical records, and federal archives, and the Catholic Church, when they settled here, also kept records of the indigenous people of the lands, which I think is very important. And then I wish Sam was here because LMU did this wonderful honoring memorial, and I didn't know that, and I wanted to ask him about that. So next week, remind me, we're going to ask Sam about the Tongva Memorial, the Gabrielino Tongva Memorial. Yay. All right. That is our little history for that. Now, on to our guests. I am very excited because this is my new favorite podcast. And I listen to this podcast when I'm running. I listen to this podcast when I'm putting on my makeup. I listen to this podcast when I'm grocery shopping. And I have verbally responded back to them on the podcast while shopping. And people at the grocery store think I'm talking to them. It's very humorous because I don't speak in complete sentences. And I'm very excited. I hope you all go and check them out. We're going to get where you can find them, all the podcast sources. I listen to them on Spotify. This is the Theater Podcast, THEATRE. Thank you. And theater, like the building, THEATER. Theater Podcast. And we have, I'm going to bring them on in a moment, but we have our host, CJMerriman, who you all may remember from seeing, if you went to see me in Dudley, she was in Dudley as well. All three of them are Sacred Fools members. CJ was a producer of the Serial Killers for many years at Sacred Fools, which I love. She also played Mary Watson in Watson, which I brought that up because I also played Mary Watson. Interesting. And also a graduate of the Webster Conservatory of Theater Arts. Guess who else graduated from there? CJ and I are pretty much the same person. So that's going to be really interesting when she comes on here. Also, J. Bailey Burcham, who is currently the operations manager at the Pasadena Playhouse. And if you follow him on TikTok, you get to see how haunted the Pasadena Playhouse is. And I scream at that phone regularly, get out, get out. But I think the ghost might be nice. He is a graduate of Wichita State University, right by my home, where I grew up in Tulsa. And he was where I met him as a manager at the Room Live Escape Room, which was amazing. And I miss it. Please, pandemic be over so we can be in public again. And Scott Leggett, also a member of Sacred Fools. And I was so impressed by how many awards this man has won for a Hollywood Fringe, for acting and directing. Very impressed. And also, I thought it was really interesting, played the title role in this Watson show, which I want to learn more about what they did together, and is a graduate of theater at Penn State University, where he worked with Keegan-Michael Key and Ty Burrell. And here we are. I'm going to bring them on to learn all we can about the Theater podcast. Scott, CJ, Bailey, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, I didn't know we had choreography.
It's a voting competition.
It's called Jazz Fingers, Scott. Jazz Fingers.
Jazz and Vogue. Thank you. This also reminds me we need a KP Live song because now I want people to Vogue every time they come on the show. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm really excited.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
This is fun. So much.
Yay. I have to say, I'm also a little bit nervous. And it's funny because I know all of you.
Yeah, we're buds.
I know, but I started listening to this podcast and I was like, oh man, they know a lot about theater.
Fake it till you make it. That's sort of our motto.
That's kind of how I felt going into this myself, and then it turns out I don't.
But now you do, because you do all this research and you read all these shows. And I'm like, I'll read 2 shows from a playwright and be like, oh my gosh, they're my favorite playwright. I love them. Then I realize I don't even know them.
Same thing many a time.
Well, I'm excited to find out a little bit more about you and about this podcast and how it all started. So I'm wondering if you all will give me a quick Reader's Digest version of you, where you're from, how you got into theater, and if you're not from LA, how you ended up here.
Sure. Go ahead, Scott.
I'll start because I'm the oldest. So this will go long. My mother was a theater major, and so from a very young age, I was around a lot of theater. And then in middle school, I really caught the bug, and we did this live show in front of the whole school, and people laughed at funny things I did, and then I was hooked from there. And then I was an Air Force brat. So I was born in West Virginia, but then moved all over the place. And then went to high school in Florida. And then I ended up going to Penn State for college. But when I was in Florida, that's when I was in high school. And I started doing a lot of stuff, not just in school, but the local community college had open casting. So I started doing a lot of stuff and got dumped into the proverbial deep end doing things I was way too young to do, but it was awesome. And then went to Penn State and studied theater, and then went to Chicago for a little bit, and then came out to LA.
Love it. And when you're coming out to LA, how were you crossing over into the film world, or what brought you out here?
It was more, I had a flurry of people who were all kind of coming out here around the same time. And I loved Chicago, and I did, took some Second City classes and did a lot of storefront theater, small theater in Chicago. And it was great. But it was clear that the opportunities just weren't as open as they would be out here. So I came out here to as an actor, wanting to also direct and also do some writing. But I really, I was really open to doing whatever, any kind of acting, anything that would pay me money to do what I love to do. So yeah.
I think we all came out here going, I'll do whatever.
I'll do whatever it takes, please.
Great.
I love it. CJ Bailey, what about you?
I'll go next.
Sure.
I was always kind of out in front of my family all the time at family events. I'd be like, everyone sit down, I'm going to sing something. But I saw Les Mis when I was 7. My parents took me to the tour that was coming. I grew up in rural Illinois, by the way. They took me to the Fabulous Fox in St. Louis, and we were like in the 7th row for Les Mis. And that was when I was like, theater, this is what I want to do. The sidebar of all of this is when my parents were dating, which I didn't find out till years later, they went to theater together for dates. So they saw Yul Brynner in The King and I, and they saw Robert Goulet in Camelot. And I mean, it's the Midwest, it's the rural Midwest. So it's all about big musicals, which was also kind of like a rude awakening for me when I got to theater school. I went to the same school as Sam. I went to Webster University Conservatory, go Gorlocks. And I think it was like the first time that I ever actually picked up a play, other than like when I had to read Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth in English class. Rural public school here. So it was the first time I ever had to pick up and read actual plays. Conservatory was good for me because, and I'd been warned about it before I went in, it's boot camp. You have long days. There's a lot of work to do when you're not in class. And then if you get in a show, it's added on stuff. The other thing that I thought was valuable for me about conservatory, other than just kind of making me diligent and hardworking, also the fact that they broke down your bad habits in the beginning and then gave you like fun tools to be a good artist after that. The other thing that, it's a conversation that the three of us have been having lately about Theater 101. Something that conservatory was really good for me about, which is why I don't have a problem giving my time for it, even though I'm not getting paid a ton of money for it, was we were required to do work hours every semester at conservatory. And it made the tech kids hate us, but it was building costumes or working backstage or hanging and focusing lights. And I found out that I kind of really enjoyed doing stuff like that. So in fact, the first company that I worked with when I moved out here at the fresh age of 22, I moved out here 3 months after I graduated from college in 2006. One of the first companies I joined was Thrance, which was theater and dance mixed together, but it was a very small company that didn't have any funding. And so when we would put up a show, there were slots to sign up. Like, when are you going to come help paint? Or when are you going to come help build the set? Or when are you going to come help hang lights? And I personally like doing all that legwork. Like, I just like all of the steps into building a show. I love performing, but I think, and then, when you open the show, there's this pride of like, I helped put this entire thing up. I didn't just show up for rehearsals. I built that thing over there,
Yeah, absolutely. We have that we do that at Kentwood. We have these work Sundays where everybody comes and participates and helps to build this theater. And I mean, it takes a community to.
You have to do that with community theater too.
You have to. If you don't have a ton of huge budget, you are relying on the graciousness of others. And it is so rewarding to look at something, seeing it being built, going, this is not going to happen. There's no way this is opening on time. And then sitting there opening night going, wow.
Well, and some of my most formative experiences were in community theater. Like community theater was when I was doing Damn Yankees when I was 15 years old. And it was the first time I had a director sit me down and be like, hey, listen, you're talented, but your attitude stinks.
Wow.
And it doesn't matter how talented you're going to be. If you're hard to work with, you're not going to have any kind of a career in performing. So that forever changed me. I will never forget that moment. Harvey Mack from Illinois, love ya. He gave
shout out.
Yeah, I mean, and we have also, the three of us have discussed those moments where we've had a mentor or a director or someone that we looked up to sat us down and said, hey, knock it off, be more professional, or pull your own weight. And that happened when I was in community theater. Community theater in Central Illinois was when I finally found the people that because I grew up in a rural school that nobody cared about the arts. It was weird to be into music and theater. And then all of a sudden I found this community of people that loved everything that we loved the same things. And then when I got to theater school, it was just another beautiful moment of that as well.
I love that. Real quickly, Bailey, before we have you give us your Reader's Digest version, Shari's watching and says, theater is community. Shari Barrett said that. And I think that is such a, yes.
100%.
That's what it is.
Agreed. Well, my sort of Reader's Digest version is that, I was lucky enough, privileged enough to grow up in Wichita, Kansas, a big little city right in the heart of Kansas that has a place called Music Theater Wichita, which is a regional theater that brings in Broadway talent to play the leads and then casts everything else locally and pays very well. And I was lucky enough to do shows there as a child, but also their teen choirs and just kind of grew up seeing the shows every summer. And they did huge productions. I remember seeing South Pacific as a kid. And then my first major role there was Luther Billis in South Pacific when I was 27 or 26. No, it would have been earlier than that. I was 24, 25. But I went to a performing arts school from preschool through high school and was lucky enough to have a mother who taught there. So I went there for free. And I basically was just able to grow up amongst theater and choir and a lot of things artistic. And then I went to school. I went to KU for a year for creative writing. And I was like, I hate this. And then I moved to Kansas City and I did theater there for a long time. If you listen to the podcast, you'll find out that I went to a school that I call Hogwarts. It is not Hogwarts, but it's a little tiny school connected to a museum, connected to a school in Overland Park, Kansas, that has way too much money. And so they have this huge theater program. And the head of the program, she's still there. Her name is Beatty Pettigrew. And she taught all the acting and directing classes as well as, transformation and poisons, potions, the dark arts. No, she was phenomenal, and she was that mentor for me, like CJ and Scott both had. Just someone who sat me down one day and was like, if you want to do this, you need to take it seriously. And I was like, oops, okay. So I started taking it seriously, and I feel like it has done me well too. I moved to LA after going to Wichita State, which sort of filters into Music Theater Wichita. That's kind of, that's how I got the roles there. Got paid very well to do that and felt like I can take on the theater world. Thought about New York, wasn't super. I don't know. I've been in New York. I've seen Broadway plays, and I know a lot of people who have gone to New York for a year and moved back to Wichita because they just couldn't. They didn't like it. They couldn't handle it. They didn't like the audition process. And I said, maybe it's something else. Maybe I figure something else out. I have family out here. I have a brother out here who's in the film industry. So I said, why don't I try LA? And I've been here 7 years, and I direct a lot. I write a lot. I act a good amount. I want to produce more than anything. I really want to amplify other voices more than anything, especially right now. And I love this podcast a lot because we get to read a ton of plays, and that's sort of my nerddom. All of the right here is books and movies, but everything above this is plays. So I'm a nerd, but we
all love it.
We like it.
We like it.
I love that. And one of the things that you all talk about is that the podcast is, a podcast for theater nerds. And as I started doing the publicity for this, I did start getting all these responses of like, why did I not know this existed? And I'm like, they're new. They've only been around for a year.
A year.
Exactly.
It's 51 episodes tomorrow.
Come listen to us. You have so much backlogging to listen to.
So many episodes. And we started out doing 2 to 2.5 hour episodes. And at one point we said, we can't sustain this. And people aren't listening to that long of a podcast. I mean, there are pause buttons, but also like, come on. So we started kind of updating and getting tighter and doing part 1, part 2, part 3 if we needed it. Now though, we're in season 2 and we have really tightened it up. We had some audio issues in the first few miniseries. Now we sound great, in my opinion. We've got stingers. We've got added music.
Shout out to
Ryan Johnson. Shout out to Scott, who does our
editing
episodes together for us.
They just sound better now, and they're worth listening to. We just covered Ionesco. I'll stop pitching the podcast in a second, but we did Lorraine Hansberry right before that. We've done August Wilson, Beckett, Sarah Rule, Sarah Kane, which is easy to confuse. So don't listen to one and listen to the other.
They are different.
They're very different.
Oh my God, different. They're earth-shattering.
I'm going to say this to anybody when you're starting. Just make sure that when you press the episode, you know what you're listening to.
That's something we should say out loud, is that it is a very adult podcast. We allow ourselves to say whatever we want. We're very unedited. If we ever are going to speak about something that might be triggering, we do put disclaimers at the beginning and warnings and make sure that people understand what's going to be going on. But there's a lot of just us being buddies, and we really love each other, so we kind of allow ourselves to just gross humor and like stupid things. So be aware. Don't think it's just very proper theater talk, because I don't know that that's what it is.
Not.
Well, the part of the original conversation, it all came up from us hanging out. And then Bailey one day was like, this is a podcast. We should do it. So it was the idea that the idea was we'd finished a show and we were at the bar talking about the show. And that's how every episode should be the feel. So we don't get too academic about it. We do some light research in terms of, context and knowing who the playwrights are and where they came from and all that sort of thing. But really it's about reacting directly to what's on the page and then making fun of each other and joking and calling each other names, sometimes
Absolutely.
Profane, sometimes slightly profane. It's not necessarily for the children.
Right.
But yeah, it's about having a good time and nerding out, out on our art and what we love. So
that's the biggest thing I think for me, is that I love the in and outs of how small the theater world is and how connected it is to the film world. And especially being in LA, our theater world is so connected to the film world, and so we get to do that a lot, where it's like, oh, and they made a movie of this, and it's got these people who did it on the stage, but also here's this Easter egg where they threw in this guy who was in the original production, even though it was 50 years later, and it's great things like this. And that's kind of what
it shows up a lot.
Who?
Yeah.
Rip Torn.
Rip Torn and Mike Nichols are probably our two most talked about people on this podcast, because they're connected in so many ways to both worlds. And we like to highlight the LA theater scene in general. We can definitely do some Kentwood shout outs. Absolutely.
Yes. Let us know.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Actually, what number are we in Greece?
What are we? We're in the top 10. We were like 10 or 9 or something.
Oh no, we're not. No. We're number 3. We are the third highest arts podcast in Greece.
Right.
Where they invented it.
Where they invented it. They know what they're talking about.
Where theater was born.
The podcast must be great.
Thank you.
We're also big in Australia, in Perth, Melbourne, and whatchamacallit, Sydney. Yeah, we're good. Yeah.
I think it's because we had on a guest who was in the Book of Mormon Sydney, the Australia tour. He did the Down Under tour,
that's
New
right,
Zealand and stuff, and he we did an artist spotlight with him. His name's Teddy Trice. He's phenomenal. And then now he did his Book of Mormon Broadway debut the week before COVID hit.
Oh my gosh.
Can you believe that? His Broadway debut in Book of Mormon as the African general. I don't know that show, and sadly, I want to see him in it. I'm waiting to see him in it because he's been touring it for years. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Because like at least he got that weekend. But like, can you imagine that high and then like, I love my job. I'm going to, oh no, not going to work.
Man.
Yeah, I'll feel that. I have to say, one of the things, I mean, the way you're talking about this, and I'm glad you pointed this out, it is intelligent. I'm going to say this. You do your research, you talk about it in an intelligent way, but it is goofy and fun. And that's why I respond to you when I'm grocery shopping and listening to the podcast, because it feels like a conversation.
Yeah.
And the way you're talking about it, I feel like I'm a part, as an audience member, I feel like I'm a part of the conversation. And then I'll be sitting there and be like, really, Bailey?
I can just hear you laughing about it, Sam.
Yeah. What?
I just know your laugh. I can just hear you laughing about it.
Yeah. So can Ralph's. Ralph's hears that. Tackle the whole store.
That's funny.
It's really good. And I have to say, when I was very first listening, you get into a conversation about theater versus theater. And that was one of the moments where I was like, absolutely, R.E. And then kind of moment of like, sorry, and on the phone.
There's a collective decision by American journalists that theater should only be spelled one way so that there's not typos for editors. So it's only ever spelled for all critics. Any review you see with the word theater in it, it's Theater, which everywhere else in the English-speaking world says Theatre is the art form. Theater is the building, and I will die on that hill.
We will die with you.
Right next to you. So, okay, I love that you all started. You talked about how it got started. You all sitting at a bar after a show, and that was the other thing I was going to say is that. I think many of us in Los Angeles have had this experience where we go see a show and then we go to a bar or a Denny's afterwards and talk about it. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm loving about this is that you will relate it to productions you've seen and or been in, which I think is super great. And then sometimes you'll talk about other productions. So I feel like you're not necessarily dishing on somebody. Which I feel like whenever my friends and I are talking about a show we've just seen, it's not always like it shouldn't be for public consumption. But what I love about theater is that it is for public consumption.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been critical of stuff. I think we all try to like keep names out of it if we saw a production that we hate. Although, a spoiler alert, there's one coming up in the next couple of episodes where I'm going to get real about a big theater company and a horrible production of a very good play. But it's rare that we do that. But I think also punching up at the big boys, like the Geffen can take criticism. It's not the Geffen that did it, but the Geffen, Pasadena Playhouse can take a little jab here and there about a show from 5 years ago or whatever. So
honestly, I think I do more dishing on my personal life and how I was raised. So I'm way more nervous about my parents hearing the podcast than
you do reference home a bit, and
keep listening. It keeps coming and coming.
She's working stuff out.
This is really therapy for me.
It's a group therapy. I mean, the catharsis after a show is awesome. Like, crack open a beer, and it's like, that's great. Like, that was fun. So
I'm always
that's how we wanted to feel
leading up to recording sessions with these guys. So
you get nervous?
Oh yeah, it's just and I know I've discussed this with Scott and Bailey before, but there is a whole different kind of nervousness that comes with podcasting, because I'm a huge listener of podcasts and I listen to news ones. Of course I do My Favorite Murder. I do all of these different kinds of things. And I feel like if it's the right podcast, there is, you have a feeling that you want to, we're talking about shows we've been in. We're talking about things that we've seen, but at the same time, like, there's been several episodes where like a specific playwright speaks to me because they're writing about an issue that I've had in my life or an experience I had in my childhood. And so I think podcasting has made people public figures in a way that like television and movie stars necessarily aren't as open with the public, because I listen to a lot of podcasts where people talk about what their family life was like growing up, or, it's way more personal. And I wanted to be that way with this, whether the guys like it or not.
No, we love it.
But so, yeah, there's been my dad has finally just subscribed to the podcast, and I've just been sitting back and waiting for him to say something. I don't think my mom will ever listen to it, but my dad will. So I'm nervous about it. And you're just nervous about letting your personal life out there. And sometimes we say things that we're worried that people will disagree with us on. So it's just a different kind of nervous in comparison to memorizing a script and putting on a costume and going out on stage and performing,
Right. Yeah. Because you all really talk about your experiences with the show, what draws you to it. You talk about at the end of every episode. I'm assuming you continue this. I'm still at the very beginnings, but you talk about which are your favorite shows and which roles you want to play, and that's really revealing because you've just gone in depth about these characters, what they're doing, good or bad, and then to say, I really want to play that role after it's, you've gone into it. Maybe that person isn't the best moral person or not kindest person or whatever. And it says a lot about who we are. And then people start to judge you, but I don't think judging you. I think we're all, me too. So that brings me to my question of so you started this because it was fun and you saw that this was a podcast, but what are you hoping people get out of it? Or do you care?
No, I think, your description of your reaction, talking back to it while walking through the grocery store, I think that excites me the most. And we've had some other friends and listeners, you go, I just got mad. I just disagreed. And I think that's fantastic. So if I want people to feel like they're sitting around with us and having their opinions too, and remembering their experiences too, as well as the great joy for me is a lot of these plays and playwrights I haven't gone back to since college, since being required to read them. So going back and discovering new stuff is always amazing. I didn't really know Sarah Kane before this. She was just somebody who'd been in my blind spot, and whoa, shook me to my core. But then the rediscoveries have been amazing. I think all three of us, we talk about this amongst ourselves, but when we reread Arthur Miller, and it was like, we got to do Arthur Miller, and then all of us were like, holy shit, do you remember this and how good it was? And so that's been the fun part for me. And so people, if this gets anybody to go and pick up a play and either rediscover or discover something, then that's a success for me.
And my new favorite thing, because our main mini series are a macro look at a playwright's evolution through all their writing. So we don't get super deep into every single play. We read 3 of them that are throughout their timeline, and then sort of talk about how they progressed and how that relates to culture from America or internationally or whatever it may be, based on war, based on time, whatever. But then we started doing this thing. I don't know if you've listened to any of them yet, Sam, but we've started doing this thing called Theater and Stuff, which is a bonus series that we insert an episode. It's usually like an hour and a half, maybe an hour, on something adjacent to theater, so that we kind of break up the playwright part of the series. And we did an episode recently on theme park theater.
It was so
go ahead, Scott. Yeah. We did what was the last one we did?
Talk radio.
Oh, that one's about to come out next week. We compare and contrast the movie and the play Talk Radio, Eric Bogosian's Talk Radio.
Right.
We did an episode on Star Wars, the original space opera,
where we just ranked them. We just rank them. We kind of compare it to theater, and we talk about who has acted in it that is theater adjacent and stuff. But mostly it's us just being like, this is how I enjoy Star Wars. It's really fun.
I almost took that bait and was just about to start on the Star Wars, but then
take that.
Just go listen to it. Just go listen to it.
Yeah, it doesn't. We don't get heated. Well, we don't get heated at each other, but there's definitely some sparks that fly. It's cool.
Some big opinions out of us three. We have some big opinions on all these playwrights and on a lot of things, on everything from just rural life, like when we talk about CJ and I's growing up, all the way to like transcendent existentialism. Just, we're insane. Yeah. We like it.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, it's this spectrum of thought, and it's really great. And that's what I love. You can get really deep into something, and then also in like the next turn be making some very inappropriate joke about I mean, it's actually pretty appropriate, but and I love that. Speaking of which, and I am curious, is there a drinking game that goes along with your podcast?
Yes. We should mention that Annie Baker is she's a playwright. If anyone doesn't know, she's a phenomenal playwright that everyone should check out. But she writes a lot of ums and uhs into her scripts, and she writes our script, as you will be able to tell if you listen, because especially early on, we drone with the ums and uhs, but we get to our points, and it's all very good. I'm not trying to undersell the podcast, but I will say, if you were to take a sip every time I say you'd be pretty plastered about halfway.
You'd be hammered by the end.
Little sip, and you'll still.
Yeah.
and then also, is there a way to get the moonshine y'all keep talking about?
Sure, I'll send you some. That's a secret where I get that. I can't tell you where I get that in LA because that's a big secret, but I will send you some.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
I'll bring you some now that I'm all vaccinated.
Yeah.
They do not sponsor us, but listen, moonshine sponsor us.
We should say that early on, the early episodes were us intentionally drinking and being inebriated.
As if it was at a bar.
Yeah, as if it was at a bar. We've since sort of moved away from that. Like maybe we'll sip a beer or something. But with the early first couple episodes were we're gonna get hammered. Well, then you talk for 3 hours and then you're hammered.
I re-listened to our pilot recently, which is Tracy Letts.
Thank you for doing him.
I love Tracy Letts, always and forever. August Osage is probably in my top 3 plays of all time. But I say some things on that episode that I've contemplated going back and deleting because I'm like opinionated and I'm talking about like misfitism in theater and like all these things where I'm like, I don't know that I even feel that way. Like, what am I talking about? So weird. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, I also have to say, every time I listen to a new playwright, I go, "Oh, I need to direct this." So it's also very inspiring. So I'm right there with you all. I know you all want to direct and act and all these. You're going to have a lot of creativity coming out of this.
Well, I think that's the other thing is that the side effect of this is that I think all 3 of us now have these epic lists of dream projects, whether it's acting or directing or just producing. Like there's some shows that's like, I just want to make this show happen. I can't, for various reasons, can't be in it or whatever. But yeah, it's been a treat to do that.
We're all really obsessed with trying to produce some Carol Churchill.
We want to do some crazy deep cut Carol Churchills.
We do like a 3-hour episode on her. She's awesome.
I'm in the Carol Churchill episode currently.
Okay.
I paused it to listen to others, and then I went back at my last Ralph's stop. So I'll finish her tomorrow on my run. And I told CJ a very funny story about my Carol Churchill experience with Vinegar Tom.
What was it?
Do you want to share? That's a great play.
I don't know if I can.
Okay.
Everyone should read Vinegar Tom.
The set design was a very interesting design.
Yeah, this is a funny story.
That was a little uncomfortable.
Oh.
I'll tell you all
those stories.
I will say, okay, so Mario Rocha, one of our audience members from when you were talking about the theater in theme parks, wanted to know if any of you have seen the Hunchback of Notre Dame Festival of Fools show at Disneyland.
Okay.
I love it.
I have seen this and I've watched it on YouTube about 100 times in my life because it's phenomenal. Yes, I will say I had a huge list of things I wanted to bring up on that podcast. We have a guest on there, Jamie Robledo, who's a phenomenal director in town, who has directed for Shanghai Disney and things. And we gave a lot of time to T2, Terminator, T2 3D, and a lot of time to some other things. And at the end, I was sort of like, man, I can't just sit here and rifle off all my favorites. So we don't get to that, but I think I just list it. I do a big list at the end. I think I do say it. But we get some deep cuts in there. We get weird with that one. It's a fun episode. Check it out. Theme park theater and
theme
stuff.
Park theater.
Is that what we called it?
Yeah. It came out recently. I will say Hunchback of Notre Dame is one of my favorite Disney movies. So like I would love to see that show.
I can't watch it because it makes me cry too hard. I saw
me
it.
And Fox and the Hound.
I saw it in the movie theater and I wept and I just can't. I've never been able to bring myself. I've only seen it one time because it just made me cry so hard.
The music's amazing.
It's beautiful.
From the bells of Notre Dame.
Yes. Bailey's our singer in the group.
No, I'm the one who acts like he's a singer and sings in silly character voices, so you can't tell that I'm out of key. It's the best part. It's easy.
That's the trick. I get it now.
And at the end of every episode, if you stick around till the final moments of the episode, not only do you get to hear me butcher a musical theater song, but we always have at the end of the episode a brand new song written every week for every miniseries, written by Pam Quinn, who is a phenomenal playwright and songwriter. She and I have written a musical together. I saw her today. She's fantastic, but we've what was my point? Oh, she writes a song for every single miniseries, and they're all phenomenal.
And they're all playwright centric. They're specific to each playwright, and they're just delightful and brilliant and beautiful. It's extraordinary. We're very lucky to have her.
Absolutely.
She shows up for a couple of our episodes too.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to this because I've loved her work, and I'm like,
oh, cool,
really great.
She joins us for all of our. We do a bonus we do a lot of bonuses, but every fifth playwright. After that, we take another break and we do an actual mini series on things related to film and theater. Since we're in LA, we figured why not. So we've done plays that were turned into movies. We've done movie musicals. We've done movies that were musicals that weren't plays before it, like weren't stage plays, like Greatest Showman, Tommy, things like that. South Park, bigger, longer, uncut is on there as well. And there was another one. High School Musical.
High School Musical.
So we've done a few miniseries like that where we get to nerd out on just like more pop culture things. One of my favorite episodes is when we get really into it on about Jesus Christ Superstar. The movie versus the show.
That's one of my favorites as well.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anyway.
I saw Ted Neely do that live.
I did too, but he was like
So
2 years old and way too old to play.
We saw the same tour, CJ, when we started talking about it. I mean, I was just a baby.
I mean, you're 10 years younger than me, so you must have been like 25 or 15 when you saw that. Because I was 25 when I saw it.
Let's go with that. So I want to get into a little bit serious of a conversation, as you are all, before we get to the fun, silly stuff, before we wrap up, you've been studying all these playwrights and their compilation of work, and we in Los Angeles, this great theater town, are having a lot of hard conversations right now about along the lines of diversity, and so I wanted to kind of get a pulse on how you think we move forward when we come out of this pandemic in seeing more diversity on stage and and off stage with directors and playwrights, and how do we move forward?
I think it's a couple things, and I think because I've thought about this a lot, and as you said at the beginning, we're all members to Sacred Fools, and I a year and a half ago finished my term as artistic director or co-artistic director, so it's been a huge part of the conversation. I think the few things that we need to grapple with are the numbers. So 60% of America is white, and 70% of American theater is white. So to be aware of those numbers, the numbers get a little bit better in LA because of the Latinx population. So we have a little bit more BIPOC here in Los Angeles. But it's about sort of acknowledging those numbers. And then I feel from my position as a white cisgender man is to make space, reach out, and try and create as many opportunities as possible. But more importantly than anything else is just being an audience member and or a supporter. Too often people just don't go outside of their little bubbles in LA theater. And I think there's natural and just sheer geographical reasons for that, but I think it's important for folks to learn about East West players and go see East West players, and learn about Deaf West and go see Deaf West. It's not that much. And then just always being aware. And when I first got to LA in the early 2000s, I didn't, from my perspective, see a lot of racism, but what I saw was not consideration at all. So now, and after I spent, 3 or 4 years at, on top of directing, being in an audition room, but just being an observer as artistic director and a producer in rooms and seeing people come in is just being aware, like, oh, I've got 5 people in this cast. There's no reason why, over half of that can't be people of color or, non-gender conforming. All of that needs to just be constantly at the forefront. And again, reaching out the hand. Like, I don't think we necessarily do that enough, like engaging people and trying to help create those opportunities. I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
And I think there's the word that I like to always bring up when diversity is being talked about is representation rather than diversity, right? Because diversity is great. You could, having a very mixed cast of people is awesome, but also understanding your audiences and understanding that if, let's use Pasadena as an example. If you have a predominantly white audience base most of the time until you do something like Little Shop with MJ Rodriguez and George Salazar, and it totally changes your audience base. If you're normally not doing things like that, and all of your ushers are white, and all of your box office is white, and all of your, if that is the case, then it looks like to other people coming in that that's who you want to represent and that's who your audience is. So it goes down to the ushers. It goes all the way down to the people who are taking your ticket and ripping it. If they don't represent the audience, that audience isn't going to come. And people think that it's about like, we'll cast more and we'll, things like that. And it's like, yeah, you should be doing that. That's awesome. But also it starts in the front of the house, and it goes all the way up to the artistic directors and and the board. And I'm not saying that you have to force yourself to make sure that your artistic director is a person of color. Maybe that's not right for your theater group. That's okay. It's not that, because then we're just talking about diversity for diversity's sake and not representation. And we've said this a lot. Scott and CJ and I talk about this a lot, but there's a lot to fix here in LA theater and in everywhere theater, especially Broadway, right, too. But we can help by doing it differently, amplifying, and sort of taking a little bit of a back seat right now, while also realizing that there is work to be done. And once that work is done, we can get back to making art. Because at the end of the day, I think we all just want to tell stories and make art. And we need to be able to do that together, collaboratively, no matter what that means. And representation, that's just the word I always want to throw out in this conversation, is like, I just want us to see it from that perspective, because it's LA, like you said, Scott, is a cornucopia of culture. And
you can get we have everything here.
Everyone.
Like everything here. So there's no reason not to use them.
Well, and my addition to that, and the theater that I'm going to call out that I've worked with several times is Loft Ensemble up in the Valley. They're a relatively new company. They've been around like 8 or 9 years now. Bree Pavey, it was one of the people that kind of started the whole thing, and she's amazing. And I've worked with them as an actor. I've worked with them as a choreographer quite a bit. And the thing that I have always admired about their community is that they will have a show, they will put out the cast breakup, and then they will cast it, and it is completely gender and ethnically blind. Like, I have seen sisters being played by people that represent as men, and the only time that they do things that are specific is when, like, years ago I did a show about Columbine with them, and obviously you need to cast Isaiah Scholes as an African-American person. They did Blues for Mr. Charlie, and obviously that needs to be specifically cast. But otherwise, it is open, and all different colors, shapes and sizes, genders. They just cast who they think is right. And they're also very supportive about, like, especially with their core members, like, what are you interested in? So they really uphold their members as artists and give them chances to try things out. But I also think that we as theater artists, because I feel like I've been in a lot of situations where I've heard people say, like, well, we cast Hamlet as white, so the rest of his family has to be white.
Right.
Well, why? I mean, because the audience will have a problem with it. Okay, well, why don't we train our audience to just maybe not, or even if they sit down and notice it at first, keep watching and then, oh, okay, this doesn't bug me at all that it's different. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been an interesting conversation that we've had a lot. And I want to also talk, Bailey, about what you said about representation. There's been quite a few times, speaking just specifically at Kenwood, where we brought that up, where the audience will believe whatever we tell them. Mm-hmm. So if we come out, I'm Latinx, but often I've been cast in families with white people, and I could easily look like the Spanish nanny, but we come out and we go, oh, that's the sister, great. And people accept whatever we are going to.
If you can suspend your disbelief that there's a dragon outside or a rhinoceros outside watching a Ionesco play, then you can believe that anyone is a family and anyone, like, let go of that.
Yeah.
Like,
let it go. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, especially when it's good. Like, if you tell your story well and your actors are good and prepared, it doesn't matter. People will suspend all disbelief and get into the character. You know, they do it with, it was an old argument, but it's like people do it with Disney and talking animals all the time. Like, right. But right. Somehow, somewhere, somebody put these rules and we just need to break them. The breaker of chains. Yes. We just need to break it, It's just, but it's just about changing it and being open to it. And
go ahead.
Oh no, go please.
I was just saying we're very open about all our feelings about this on the podcast as well. We get into a lot of this kind of stuff, and we've let our guests get into their feelings about it, and we have a lot to say here. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me because, I haven't gotten so much into your newer playwrights, right? I've been reading some of the oldies but goodies. And the thing I think we get caught up in when we're doing, I don't want to say I don't want to talk about Arthur Miller and say classic because that will make me cry. But the classical theater is that the where we start out with is it's automatically white. These are automatically white people. And cis people and able-bodied people and unless specifically identified as LGBTQ, then they're straight as well. And so now as I'm hearing you talk about, as I'm listening to this podcast, I'm hearing you talk about these playwrights, I'm like, oh, what if we did the show, but we did, and like thinking about casting non-traditionally, and now we're opening up this whole other juicy content of stuff that's been tired because we've seen it over and over again, but now we're telling it in a different way. And it's not about the person and what they are.
Right.
Which is another conversation that we've had a lot. Like one of our actresses at Kentwood a lot, Sharonda, she talks about that she's at our theater, she's been doing roles that have nothing to do with the fact that she's a Black woman. It's just the fact of whatever the story is that we're telling.
Think about the profundity of casting an African-American woman as Willie Loman and what you can say about that and the commentary about the tearing down of the American dream with an African-American woman playing that role. Yeah, I think that's the great thing. We talk a lot about Shakespeare too. There's the problematic Shakespeare plays, and Bailey's done it with his youth Shakespeare group. But you just turn it on its head. That's the great thing about Shakespeare. Ain't nobody gonna sue you for anything. So turn it on its head. The story of apparently one of the best American productions of Hamlet ever was B. Arthur playing Hamlet like in her 40s. Mm-hmm. And so here's a woman in her 40s at the top of her craft playing the most complicated role arguably in drama. And that kind of stuff is exciting, and
Steve and I both just clutched our pearls.
It's like, I know,
we both
But I do love that B. Arthur.
I love B. picture. I want to see that so bad. Yes. And I want to thank you all. We're about to wrap up and I've got 2 silly questions for you. But I wanted to thank you all for doing this podcast and getting us to think about theater in a different way, to nerd out, to explore, expose ourselves to these playwrights and works that maybe we don't see or hear about all the time, and doing them in new and different ways. So thank you. I hope everybody please subscribe to this podcast and see it or hear it. Where can we find you before I ask these questions? I listen to you on Spotify. Where else can they find your podcast?
Apple, Stitcher, Podcast Addict. You can everything. It's on every single podcatcher that you can find, except YouTube. I think people do podcasts on YouTube, but it's not on there. But Audio Boom. Shout out to Audio Boom, who produces our podcast, which is awesome, and puts it out on everything. And we just hit 16,000 listens a couple weeks ago, which is not a terrible number. Could be better.
Where can we find you on the socials?
What is our tag? Oh, it's at theater RE _ theater _ pod. And we'll send that to you too, Sam.
Yes, on Facebook, it's theater RE theater ER. If you just put that in the search bar, it'll take you to our page.
On Twitter, we are the _ theater with an RE _ pod, the theater pod.
The theater pod.
The theater pod. That's for our Twitter stuff. Please follow us, because we're also trying to, like Bailey said, our big thing, and we haven't been able to do it because of the apocalypse. But when theater comes back in the fall, and we can really start hyping things, we would love to become sort of a hub of just announcing shows. Hey,
I can't wait to simulate myself in LA theater.
Yeah, and just hyping stuff and giving shout outs and just letting people know about opening weekends and that kind of thing. I think we're really excited about that next phase once we open up.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the next phase too. Real quickly, Mario Rocha again said, and this is really interesting, he said Peter Dinklage did Cyrano and did not wear a prosthetic nose.
That's cool. I heard that was amazing. He was insane. Yeah,
that's rad.
Yeah,
I really love his acting. I think he's very.
That makes sense.
Very, very talented. Okay, so real quickly, 2 questions for each of you. I would like to know your favorite theater experience. I know I'm asking you to choose between your children. If you have no answer for this, if you're like, I hate you, Samantha, for asking me, that's fine. That's a good answer. And then also your craziest debacle that you've either experienced or seen. You don't have to name names, but we would love it if you do. And you can talk about shows you were in if the whole show is a debacle. I was in a debacle. All right.
I've been in several debacles.
Okay. So greatest theater experience. I got to do a production of Our Country's Good at Penn State when I was in college. It was a real breakthrough for me. One of those big educational steps. I was in it with a group of grad students and professors, and I was undergrad. So I felt like I was thrown in the deep end. But it was this gorgeous experience from top to bottom. We got to visit with these prisoners, like these life prisoners at the local, who had written a play and performed a play that had gotten attention. And so we got to spend a day in a room with literally axe murderers. But the show is about the redemptive quality of art. And it was one of my best experiences.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
What about debacle?
Debacle? I don't know. I don't want to say. I don't want to say. I will say. I'll tell you. I'll tell this.
Like if something went wrong, a gun.
Okay, I'll tell this great fuck up thing that happened. So I was doing in college. Sorry. I was doing the American College Theater Festival, and I was doing a production of Greater Tuna. If you haven't ever seen it, it's a 2-man show where the 2 people play all the characters of this small town in Texas. And we did closing night of the college portion of it, but that was the opening night of the high school portion of it. And it's just a wacky comedy. So we had this like full crowd of like hyped up high school kids. And there's a sequence where there's constantly costume changes happening. So somebody's doing a monologue while somebody's changing, and then they come on stage. So my buddy, Dave Jolly, was my cohort. And I was doing a monologue filling for his costume change. Well, backstage, they were changing his costume, and he was supposed to come on eating a candy bar. And instead of handing him the candy bar, the dresser literally shoved a foot-long Snickers into Dave's mouth. And then he like came out on stage like with a look of terror, like, I can't speak, and I won't be able to speak for quite some time, and like pointing at his mouth. And so I just riffed for like 120 seconds, like a full 2 minutes of just riffing, and it brought the house down, and it was a debacle turned into sort of this glorious moment. But poor Dave, then he had to turn around and do an epic monologue with no water after having tried to eat a huge fucking Snicker bar. So
wow.
Anyway, yeah.
All right, Sage.
Greatest theater experience. In 2014, I did the brand new musical Behavior of Brutus with Sacred Fools in accordance with Burglars of Ham. It's the best musical I've ever been in. We sold out every night. We got standing ovations at the end of every night. It was an amazing cast. I worked with one of my favorite voice actors of all times, Bill Salyers. Got to do a 3-month-long run with him. It was also the first time in my life that I broke my foot, and broke it so bad. I danced on it for a weekend because there was no way I'm going to let my understudy go on for me. But it's the first time I also had to quit a show because I broke my foot so bad. So I missed the closing 2 weekends of it. Behavior Brutus, I love that show. I always will. And it was a fun award season. LA Stage Raw and ovations. It was just fun, and it was one of those magical times where you get a cast with the show that you love. Biggest debacle. I played Osric in Hamlet for 6 months up at Will Gear Theatricum Botanicum. I was in my last month of that show. They cut my lines down quite a bit. I knew that show. I went off stage. It was when everyone had already died on stage. And my last job was to run on and say that Fortinbras was there. And for whatever reason, I ran on stage and completely forgot my line. And I stuttered for like 10 seconds.
Oh, no.
What felt like a million years. And then finally just gave up and went, it's Fortinbras. And I looked around, and even dead Hamlet was laughing at me. And I ran off stage crying, and that was over 10 years ago. And I still have people in that cast walk up to me and make fun of me for it. So those are mine. Beige.
My favorite theater experience. I mean, I've had experiences in theaters that are transcendent for me, but in terms of ones I was a part of, doing the full Monty for 2 months, 8 shows a week, full nude every night in front of drunk casino crowds. That's my favorite theater experience.
Okay.
I mean, it just changed my life. It was the first time I had ever, I mean, Billis, you take your shirt off and you dance around, but with a coconut bra. But this was the first time where a big dude like me, I was, all right, I'm going all the way, full naked in a G-string through the ends number, and then you rip it off at the end. And our director was like, no, you're holding that pose for like 3 seconds before the lights go on behind you.
God.
And we were like, okay. It was a thing. So it was a lot. My biggest theater debacle was in theater school. We were doing a show, Anatomy of Grey was the name of the show, a phenomenal show everyone should check out. It sort of came out of, the writer wrote it about his experience with the AIDS crisis, and but it has nothing to do with that. It's set in like 1800s or whatever, and it's phenomenal. But we had asked for glow tape for all week of tech. We had asked for glow tape on the edge of these stairs over and over again. We went to the stage manager. We went to the set designer. We went to anyone we could, and we weren't allowed to touch the glow tape. So we asked, and we did as many things as we could. It's expensive, I get it, but so we went to the final dress. We went to walk off the stage where the stairs were. We're about 8, maybe 9 feet up platform, and I was leading us, and I walked right off. I landed flat on my face, bloody nose, and the girl behind me who was holding me because she couldn't see because it was pitch black fell on me and broke her arm. Luckily, they heard us scream and they all stopped, so no one else fell on us. But she was playing my wife in the show, and it's like the most beautiful moment of the show, and we had a pretty solid house because it was final dress, and it was a big community surrounding this theater, and they, it was I think like a 800 seat house, and there was like 300 people there, so it was like a real show, and they brought up the lights, and everyone ran on and helped her, and an ambulance came and all this stuff. I was fine, everything was good. But then the next day we came in and we were like having a talk, and the tech director came up and he said, it's the actor's job to tell us where they need tape.
No.
I just got
That's all.
Rage.
We screamed. I mean, we fought it forever. It was like, we were like, what? And the director agreed. She was like, why would you ever say something? Of course it's not. And then we were like, we've been begging for this for forever. It's fine.
That's not a funny debacle. That's a rage-filled debacle.
Yeah,
rage-filled debacle. It's a debacle.
I don't know if you noticed this, all three of us, as Bailey was telling this story, as soon as we heard glow tape, we all were like, I was like, oh no.
I was always told that glow tape is expensive, so we needed to place it like responsibly.
Right, and we respected that. It was like, okay, we'll wait for you to do it, but like,
maybe but maybe spend a little more money on one more roll of glow tape.
You know what else is expensive? A broken arm.
Yeah, right.
You know what else is ridiculous is putting someone on stage in the 1800s in like a pink cast.
Yeah, right.
we wrapped it in burlap and did the thing, but it was
oh my god, she got to continue doing the show. That's really
she did. She was all right, and it was, she's still a dear friend. It was a phenomenal show. We took it to KCACTF. It got invited to the theater festival. We took it to Region 5. Nice. Great things. Yeah, that's all.
I love it. Well, thank you for joining us tonight on KP Live and, sharing a little bit about your stories. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us. This was really fun. Thank you.
I can't wait to get back into things so we can come see shows.
Yay!
And shout you out in our spotlights.
Yeah.
We love that. Our first one is Vanya, Sonia, Masha, and Spike.
Wait till you get the Durang episode.
Yeah, we did Durang. So yeah.
We talk a lot about Vanya, Masha, Sonia, and Spike. It's one of my favorite shows.
Well, we have a group outing planned now, so
yay!
That's easy.
And thank you all for joining us and watching our little live show. And we will see you next week, where I know you're thinking that you're going to see the cast and director, but you're going to get a special treat with our Gilbert and Sullivan cast. And the test will be the weekend after. So come join us next Sunday at 7 p.m. And have a great week.
We should cover Gilbert and Sullivan at some point.
We will.
Well, we're doing Topsy Turvy coming up soon.
There you go.
So.